you're doing this afternoon. Great. And as everyone is doing that, Christian, do we have our principal here? Is Dr. Gresham with us?
I don't see. No, I told him to join at 3:55 because the grading presentation is second. So I have to join a little later.
Great, I appreciate it. Good afternoon to Chief Jones and to Laura and Miss Lane and Miss James and Mr. Vines. Good afternoon. It seems like you are queued up and ready to go this afternoon for us with Dr. Pfeiffer. So let's get started. First up on our agenda today, and I also want to let everyone know that Commissioner Roberts is excused from this afternoon's committee meeting due to an emergency. So just keep her in your positive thoughts, but we are certainly going to rock and roll, and I'm excited to hear this 4-year career readiness planning update from our Office of College and Career Readiness. I know that the offices are intermingled, but these are the folks that own this particular presentation. So ready for it. Good afternoon to you all.
Good afternoon. I am Rachel Pfeiffer. I'm the Executive Director of College and Career Readiness. And I will let my colleague introduce himself.
Good afternoon. My name is Kumasi Vines. I am the Director for Career Readiness.
Thanks, Kumasi. I'm going to just kick us off and set some context for today, and then Kumasi is going to run with this presentation, the work that he and the team have been doing. So as many of you may remember, it was about 2 years ago that we presented some of the findings from a review that Education Strategy Group had done looking at our career readiness preparation for students here at City Schools, and specifically our CTE Career and Technical Education programming. And we had asked them to do this study. We also had another study that I believe Kumasi will mention done by the Fund for Educational Excellence. And we wanted to be able to dig into our own programming to see how we might improve our preparation, our career preparation for our students. As we heard from Education Strategy Group, they had several recommendations of things we could improve. They talked about aligning our programming to in-demand, high-skill, high-wage occupations. They talked about improving the quality of our programming and student access to our programs. They talked about how we advise students, and they talked about developing a work-based learning program. And they talked about our district infrastructure to be able to collect data, to be able to continually assess how we were doing and not need a special study each time. And so this work has really been, over 2 years in the making, as we have taken the time to really dig into our current programming and how we could make it better. And Kumasi, who joined us as our Director of Career Readiness in August, has been taking the lead in moving this work, and I'm so grateful to have him on board. And I'm going to pass it over to you, Kumasi.
Thank you, Dr. Pfeiffer. So I believe now I do have control over this presentation. So I'm just going to jump right into it. Again, my name is Kumasi Vines, Director of Career Readiness. And today I'm just going to give you an update on our 4-year career readiness planning process. Okay, so our objective today is to share our theory of change for career readiness, to share our strategies and activities to that got us to our vision, and to provide a final decisions regarding CTE program placement. So ensuring that our students are career ready requires City Schools to re-envision our work to include both traditional CTE programming and broader student supports. And just to give a little context on that, for many, many years, our office was primarily known as the CTE office. Now, while CTE programming is a significant and a very important part of career readiness overall, we realized that CTE programs have 6,000 to 7,000 students. There's another 72,000 students that we are missing out on as part of our vision. So this entire process has brought that all together. So we will reallocate CTE resources in order to invest in career readiness holistically. We will support all students in gaining awareness and exposure to career opportunities, and we will support every high school in developing a career readiness plan. Real quick note about that. We have been meeting and will continue to meet with principals to develop a college and career readiness plan to make sure that we are in alignment with our plans for overall with our programming moving forward. This is aligned with the principal and their vision for career readiness at their schools. So jumping back to the slide, our community identified ensuring that our students gain the knowledge and skills that put them on the path towards an in-demand, high-wage career as a top priority. Basically what we found out is that our students and our families want to make sure that what we're providing them in the instruction and the experiences better enables our students to be able to take care of themselves and their families once they graduate Baltimore City Public Schools. A career readiness experience requires a collective commitment from the broader Baltimore community. So we're working on expanding and deepening our partnerships with the workforce, business community, industry partners, higher education sector, alumni, and philanthropy. One big takeaway for me from this entire process is that we definitely have some strong and vocal alumni in the community. And I want to take advantage of this robust engagement that we've had with them. And fortunately, when I started in August, we were able to bring on also a work-based learning team. And that team's main objective is to build those relationships with the industry and businesses in the community to help expand work-based learning opportunities. And they've been going 1,000 miles a minute in making those relationships, and looking forward for that activity to grow. So most of the proposed CTE program changes will be completed by school year 24-25, and a few programs will be completed by 26-27. We're committed to allowing 10th graders that are in CTE programs to finish in their current school wherever we can, wherever is possible. And we want to make sure we're providing a pathway for any affected teachers as much as possible to remain employed with city schools. So current context and vision of career readiness. So our vision, our goal is to create learning communities where a generation of Baltimore's young people will thrive and grow, graduating from our high schools with the skills, knowledge, and understanding to succeed in college, careers, our community, and wherever their dreams will take them. And to help reach our vision for career readiness, we got to make sure, and we are making sure, that we are creating a system that prioritizes preparing students for a living wage in-demand occupation that's consistent with their demand. And again, basically, that means we want to make sure we're doing everything we can to prepare our students to be able to take care of themselves and their families upon graduation. And that's regardless of which pathway they choose. If they decided, pathway in life, that is, if they decide to go directly into the workforce, to a four-year college, or get additional training in an apprenticeship program or other career or industry-related training programs, whichever, or a combination of all the above, whichever pathway they choose as they begin their post-secondary life, we want to make sure that they are as prepared as possible to be successful. We also want to make sure that our vision includes rigorous and relevant content, meaning that our certifications will be better aligned with industry expectations. Making sure that the certifications that our students and credentials that we are helping them receive make sense for the current and equally important, the future job market, not what was relevant 10 years ago in the industry. We also want to make sure there's greater coherence to the post-secondary pathways in our local workforce communities, and be better aligned with work-based learning experiences. We also want to make sure that it's more accessible to our diverse student population and more equitably distributed across the city. So as we were devising this our plan, we actually looked at how long it would take a student to get to a program and trying to ensure as much as possible that they would be able to get there in a reasonable time. We also want to make sure our programs meet the needs of our English language learners and our students with disabilities. Because funding and resources are not unlimited, we want to make sure that we're using them effectively and efficiently as possible while sustaining supportive school communities. So that's making sure that our teachers, principals, and schools have the sufficient support and that's time and resources to deliver quality programming. And as mentioned, this is a co-designing process with our schools. Okay. So just to go over our theory of change here. So in order for us to, if we take these actions, further strengthening our CTE programming and access, develop more work-based learning opportunities, provide development and support to school staff, pursue meaningful community partnerships that'll lead to some short-term outcomes, which include more rigorous, equitably distributed CTE programs, increased participation in the CTE courses and work-based learning opportunities. Our staff will receive more training and making sure they have the required materials to support their work. And city schools will have stronger relationships with families, employers, and post-secondary institutions, which will lead us to our long-term outcomes of more students completing their pathway sequence and earning credentials or certification, more students earning college credit and stackable credentials, improving proficiency rates on end of course exams for math, ELA, and science. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't control that box that is over on there, but it's just restating our vision. And that students gain knowledgeable workforce skills and experience. If we take those actions, receive those incomes that'll usher us into our vision. Implementing our theory of change. It's a lot of information on this slide. And I apologize if this was really congested. I won't go over every one of them, just gonna highlight a few of them. So implementing our theory of change while staying true to our values, it requires that we implement a range of strategies. When we're looking at ensuring that our students are receiving the training and development they need to obtain a living wage, we are realigning pathway and certification requirements to better prepare students for in-demand occupations that earn a living wage, building career pathways that incorporate stackable credentials, expanding and deepening the engagement with our pathway advisory committees, known as our PACs. And what a PAC is industry professionals, including employers, folks who really know what is required in order to be successful and achieve in a particular associated pathway. They have direct input into the curriculum, direct input into developing our teachers with up-to-date skills, and really advising us on how to best prepare our students given a particular pathway. Making sure that our programming is relevant and rigorous. So we are designing curricula to ensure our pathways, certification, and coursework are in line with in-demand high-wage occupations and industry expectations, refreshing our curricula and equipment to ensure our students have industry-relevant experiences in the classroom, and expanding academic and career dual enrollment opportunities. Equitable, I think that box may be on Christian's screen. I'm not sure. Well, I'll try to turn my camera off, see if that helps.
I wonder if you logged out and logged back in, but
I don't think there's any information there right now. I think we're okay for the moment.
okay.
Sounds good. Looking at equitable access, that involves the distribution of the pathways strategically across the city to ensure equitable access, removing barriers to entry, such as school entry criteria, and that restrict access for students for our CTE programming, and developing engagement strategies to effectively communicate career and post-secondary options, and looking at efficiency and effectiveness, piloting innovative programming and interventions to increase student success metrics, holding ourselves accountable to continuous evidence-based improvement, and customizing college and career readiness plans to each school community's needs and vision. And that just refers to what I mentioned earlier about meeting with the principals so we can have a collective vision in developing their college and career readiness plans. The redistribution of CTE pathways. So we engaged in a comprehensive process to determine how to best redistribute our pathways across the city. And Dr. Pfeiffer alluded to us engaging with, reviewing different studies and engaging with a consultant that helped us do this, Project Evident. And so what went into this? We looked at a lot of data. So the data analysis, you're going to hear the mantra a lot coming out of our office going forward. We want to identify in-demand, high-wage occupations. So this process in this analysis of the data helped us prioritize the pathway selection using market data as well. Labor market data. We wanted to ensure that we're providing a rigorous and relevant curriculum. And we wanted to facilitate the most effective use of our resources. So we looked at student enrollment patterns to make sure they're better aligned and reallocate our time and money into other areas. To support execution, we're reviewing facilities conditions and spacing and our staffing allocations and hiring successes and resources we provide for our schools and students. It's gone. Community engagement. We conducted school site visits and school focus groups. We engaged with teachers and principals. We had over 105 discussions with stakeholders, and that is not a typo, 105 meetings and conversations. We had 32 conversations with school principals. We met with 14 school communities, hosted a community town hall, and we released a survey to gather community feedback. This is just a snapshot of some of the comments that came from our school community meetings, and it really has informed our work and resulted in some concrete changes. I'll just give you a second to look over those, but just calling out a few. To be challenged, gain skills, feel happy and loved. That came from a student during a Ben Franklin community meeting, and that's, that touches all of us on many different levels. Provide rich and diverse opportunities for young women, and that came from Western. So, these are all things that we are considering or have considered and led to some concrete changes in our plan. So based on a review of our existing evidence and our conversations with the community, we have adjusted our proposal. Just to go to that variance column right now, there'll be 5 fewer schools that have CTE programming with 14 fewer positions, 1 fewer cluster, and 2 fewer pathways. Again, we are committed to supporting our teachers affected by pathway and position changes with personalized transition conversations. We're partnering with our colleagues in human capital to make this as supportive as possible with these different conversations with impacted teachers, and again with the personalized transition conversations. Okay. So by school year 23-24, we will have 9,000 available CTE seats, which is significantly more seats than the number of CTE students enrolled in our schools last year. The, column I really want to focus on is where it says available seats, that second row at or above living wage. So this is saying, enrollment is saying that there are currently 3,800 students currently enrolled in CTE pathways that lead in seats and CTE pathways that lead to at or above living wage. With this transition, the number of seats in pathways that lead to at or above living wage increases significantly to over 7,900. And we intend to increase the number of seats in pathways that offer a student a path towards living wage occupation. So our programming is being designed to help meet students and schools where they are while ensuring equity of access and opportunity across the city. Every school, every situation is different. So as we look at the whole, I guess, canvas of our schools, we realized that there were basically 4 different categories. One, increasing the breadth and depth of CTE programming, in some cases expanding the number of programs there and really increasing the depth as far as the rigor and relevance of those programs. Increasing depth, decreasing breadth. Some schools may have been stretched too thin with the number of programs, and we got data, looking at the data analysis, analyzing the data from enrollment, and really focusing on the successful programs at those locations and really taking a deep dive to make sure they're relevant and rigorous. Strengthening current CTE programs. Some schools, the enrollment and success was, doing pretty well. So we want to make sure we're investing and strengthening those programs, and then re-envisioning career readiness programming. And that, involves working with the community, working with the principal to bring a menu of career readiness services and programming and an overall strategy. Again, transitioning from us as a district thinking that CTE programming is the only career readiness plan that that we have, and this is absolutely incorrect. Each school needs career readiness programming, and in that final category right there, we're just envisioning what that programming looks like overall. So our collective commitment. We hold ourselves accountable for ensuring our students are able to access career readiness opportunities by continuously reviewing evidence on access, that's exposure to career readiness activities, participation in career readiness activities and career readiness plans, opportunities in that CTE pathway enrollment, certification participation, work-based learning opportunities, and our outcomes, which are the number of pathway concentrators, pathway completers, academic proficiency in those 2 categories, credit accumulation through the dual enrollment college ready programming, and certification success. To better support our students' academic preparation, we ask, and this is a sort of call to action, that parents and students continue to communicate with us about what they need to be successful and actively engage in the school and pathways selection process. Educators, industry experts, and employers to work with city schools to help align our pathways to industry certifications by helping us with our PACs. Employers and philanthropy can help supplement curricular materials and supplies to maximize students' learning experience. Post-secondary partners to continue to develop and expand articulation agreements for both academic and career content areas. And post-secondary partners to continue to engage with city schools to create full career pathways with stackable credentials that would help also lead to post-secondary enrollment. To ensure our students have access to the appropriate work-based learning experiences, we ask that our alumni, community members, and employers participate in career exposure activities. And I must say, during this process, we've gotten quite a bit of feedback and quite a bit of interest in how can we help. And this is one of the main ways to give our students that hands-on experience or exposure and exploration opportunities that our students can really take advantage of and benefit them. Community members and employers offer meaningful work-based learning experiences to our students. And the activities can range from allowing our students to do job shadowing or formal internship or apprenticeship. There's multiple ways that we can engage with community members and employers, and we are exploring them all and are completely open to them coming in. To ensure that our staff have the resources and trainings to support effective instruction, we ask that employers provide our staff with work experience to maintain and upgrade their skills. Their experience will allow our staff to maintain the certification and, just as importantly, incorporate and integrate what we have learned in their instruction. Industry experts and post-secondary partners to work with city schools to co-develop our professional or provide our professional development that facilitates staff learning and strengthens instruction. Policymakers to provide flexibility and the training and experience requirements for teacher certification and certification renewal. Policymakers and philanthropy to provide the necessary resources to facilitate our staff learning and growth. And to continue to improve our programs, we ask that students, families, teachers, and our broader school community continue to provide that feedback for our programming, policymakers and philanthropy to continue to provide us with the resources and flexibility to iterate and improve. So that brings me to the end of our presentation. And of course, you can always contact Dr. Pfeiffer, who's our executive director, at the email address, or contact me directly for more questions or concerns.
And the appendix is extremely robust. So I appreciate that. Dr. Pfeiffer, is there anything that you'd like to add before we transition?
I just echo Kumasi's thanks to the many, many, many stakeholders who engaged with us in this process. I know that change can be unnerving sometimes, even though it's also exciting, and people stuck with us as we kind of talked through different possibilities, and we're really able to co-create a lot of this. So just want to echo Kumasi's thanks to everyone who engaged with us.
I appreciate, to be quite honest, the way that you kept the board particularly aware of all of this work since the audit happened, right, of all of that, and then, you know, just every step along the way. I appreciate that. And I also appreciate the level of community engagement that has happened. And it's something that, you know, seems to be a bit of a challenge for large organizations, but I think you all are showing how we can involve as many partners as possible, especially during a pandemic where a lot of this engagement has happened. I appreciate that. On slide 21, you all said that you want to continue to improve the program. So you're soliciting the input and feedback from community members, from parents, from students, from business owners, from stakeholders. How specifically are people able to do that? What ways are people able to provide feedback to you all?
Sure. They can directly, of course, email me or anyone on my team to provide in general feedback, but we are also making everyone aware of the different, I guess, menu of opportunities to engage with us on different levels, whether that is, again, involving, and please stop me if I'm not answering your question, involvement on our PAC, our Pathway Advisory Councils, whether that's contacting or working with our work-based learning team to provide internships, job shadowing. Just want to come in and talk about a particular person from the community's career path, their journey on how they got from being a student to a professional. You know, there are several ways to engage with us, and we want to keep that door open for that engagement.
And I would just add, for our young people, we're working to try and create a kind of advisory structure that would allow us to have a regular group that we're bringing ideas to from our office, but also working with Rashad Staten and the student engagement work that he's doing to make sure that we're hearing a variety of different voices from across the city as well. So we were able to work with him to do a couple sessions with young people, and I think that's something we just want to keep a cadence of. Through this work, we've also been able to do regular kind of meetings with PCAB. We've had a few times when we've been able to present there and hear some ideas and answer some questions, and so I hope we'll be able to stay on the calendar there as well to be able to have those conversations both with PCAB and with CCAC.
I appreciate that. And just as we move forward, I would just encourage us to continue, as you all are saying you're doing, but to continue to determine ways to communicate the plan and the progress I think Kumasi's moving something. I see it there.
Yeah.
But
I'll stop control. There we go. I turned
yep,
control back over. Okay.
no worries. But a way that we're able to communicate these programs to community members, students, and families just ongoing. So whether as we start to go back into buildings, whether they're posters that are in our schools that, you know, you're smiling, so I'm sure you're already on it, you know, like just posters in our schools that have the programs to just continue to encourage people to become more aware of these programs that exist and the plan as we're moving forward. But 2023-24, that goal of 9,000 available seats, that is a lot of progress. And I just hope that we stick to this plan so that we can actually meet that goal, because certainly we know that our young people and our families deserve to be trained in ways where they can make livable wages to sustain their livelihoods, but also to sustain their families. So I appreciate all of this work. And certainly as we move forward, if there are any additional questions from myself or from the rest of the committee or the full board, you all know that we will certainly get those to you.
Much appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you for all of the work that is happening. And I really look forward to hearing about that student advisory group that you all are going to put together. And if at any moment you are able to invite me to some of those sessions, I would love to drop in and sit in just to hear what our students are saying and how they feel about the progress of this plan. Thank you all.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Patton. And just as a reminder for the public and those engaging, that this will all go to the full board on Tuesday as well.
Perfect.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Mr. Vines. Kumasi, thank you so much. And Dr. Pfeiffer, are you still there? I have another question. I know that we have some guests that have joined us, but I just want to know as quickly as possible, if you can, I just want to know, what are you most proud of with this particular endeavor? And then what do you see as potential challenges for implementation?
That's great. I think I am most proud of the extent of the conversation that we've had across the city about this. I don't know that we have, as Kumasi mentioned, 105 different meetings, right? Very strong opinions coming from all different directions and people with different experiences. And to be able to have a citywide conversation about the importance of preparing our young people for a career is great. We will not always agree, but we all recognize the importance of talking about it, of moving toward a goal of really getting the city on board with helping us move in this direction so our young people are prepared. And so that's just been really exciting. As Kumasi mentioned, the number of people who've said, we want to help, we have these ideas, we have these job opportunities has been great. I think that now, I can't remember whether your question was about a challenge or opportunity moving forward.
Challenges with implementation, okay. Absolutely.
Yep.
And I know we like to talk about opportunities and challenges at the same time, yep. But I want to be very specific about some anticipated challenges that we can just kind of foresee with the implementation process. There's been a lot of planning that has happened, but as implementation moves forward, what are some potential challenges? And then that also will, and the reason why I'm asking is because it can inform some of the board's work as well, in ways that we can best support district staff in moving the plan forward. So
I'll name a few, and then Kumasi, if you want to jump in with anything additional, please do. So the scope of the things that we are trying to now shift is significant, right? So this is the plan. We took a while to develop the plan, but the actual implementation, for example, we need to revise the curriculum in many of our pathways, right? The curricula that we have may be aligned to something that made a whole lot of sense for 2015, but now it's 2021, right? It may be that we didn't get employers to weigh in and tell us what they're looking for in terms of employees and the preparation they need. And so we need to make sure that we're aligned with what local employers are telling us they're looking for. So that need to overhaul curriculum is huge. We have 34 different pathways. And so that's just a lot of different areas to touch and to reorganize and refine. And it's not just going to be a district office effort, right? We'll be bringing teachers in, getting student voice, bringing in employers to do that together. And that's a significant body of work to move. I think the other obstacle that we are working through, but just want to name it, is that we don't do our work in the Office of College and Career Readiness in isolation. So, my fellow executive directors who are here from the Office of Student Wholeness, from the Office of Teaching and Learning, from the Office of Special Education, are all integral members of kind of helping us move this work forward. And one of the things we often hear from employers is, conversations about reading levels, right? Or about math levels. And so the conversations that ED Lane and I are regularly having are thinking through, college and career readiness has huge investment in the literacy work that we're doing, right? Because that matters to students being able to read manuals that they'll need for their jobs. And so making sure we continue that partnership is going to be really important. Kumasi, did you want to jump in with anything? Oh, you're on mute. Go. Sorry.
That would help. Just really quickly, I think just change management overall. This is a significant change, and change is hard. As I learned definitely in those community meetings, people are very impassioned about their students in their communities as they should be, but communicating the change outwardly, but also internally with our staff and with our teachers, and just continuing to move towards a common goal or vision, and just rallying around that. But just managing the thought of change will be a challenge. Also, we need to do a better job of marketing and promoting our programs and opportunities. Starting young, not starting in 10th grade, which is also part of change too, right? But the more exposure opportunities and exploration opportunities we allow our elementary school students as well as our middle school students, that's going to fill those 9,000 seats that we're projecting for. We can create as many seats as we want, but we got to work to make sure that students know about the program, families know about the program, families know about the earning potential of certain CTE programming, but then also making sure they understand that CTE isn't the only path towards success.
And
I appreciate that.
I will just close this out with one more to Kumasi's last point, which is that we currently do not have enough opportunities for our young people. We have 21,000 high school students. And ultimately, we'd like to see each and every one of them go through a meaningful work-based learning experience while they're in high school, right? And so we're building our infrastructure to allow that to happen. Kumasi's leading now has a work-based learning team that's been incredibly responsive to employers around the city. But again, as I said, this is a whole city effort, and we need more people to be able to offer these good experiences to expose our students to a variety of career pathways, even if they're not in CTE programming, so that 21,000 high school students get touched during their time in school.
That's great. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the work that you all are continuing to do for the sake of our children. Thank you all so much for your presentation. Is Dr. Gresham with us?
I am here, Commissioner McFadden. How are you today, sir?
Dr. Gresham, good afternoon. So I know that you brought a few of your staff members with you. And as we are queuing up, our update on Q2 grades and strategies to support student attendance and virtual learning. To everyone that is in the meeting and on the call, look at my Reach folks. Look at this Reach family. It's so good to see you all.
It's good to see you as well.
Yeah, I think the Reach is a great school in city schools. And it's just so good for you all to be with us, because as we're talking about grades today and strategies to engage our young people, I think that it is important. I appreciate a conversation that I was privy to have with Dr. Gresham about some of the progress that he and his team are making with their students at the Reach. And the Reach happens to be a high school. And more recently, as we're thinking about recovery and acceleration and hybrid learning and virtual learning, from my perspective, we've heard a lot about K-8 from the board's perspective, and not as much about what is happening in our high schools. And Dr. Gresham, of course, the Reach, former Lake Clifton, that school has a very strong athletics program. And so, Dr. Gresham, if you could take a few moments, I know that we're slightly behind time, but I think we're all right. If you could just take a few moments first to introduce your team, and then talk to us a little bit about what you all are doing at the Reach right now to engage your young people and to increase academic achievement for them.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Commissioner, thank you for your continuous support to our school. With me presenting today, I have our athletic director, Coach Herman Hareed. I have our community engagement specialist, Ms. Rhonda McKinney, our student wholeness specialist, Ms. Brooke Brock, and our administrator for special education, Ms. Monique Spencer. So a little bit about what we are into at Reach as it relates to student engagement and school-wide interventions. As like most high schools this year, with everything being virtual, we have had our challenges with student engagement. So what I want to share with you all a little bit today is about one of our school-wide interventions that we put in place to address some of the things that we were seeing in our data. I'm not sure if everybody's able to see my screen at this point.
We can see it, Doc.
Perfect. All right. So what I'll do is I want to walk you through just a little bit about our school to add a little context to where we're going with and how we came up with this school-wide intervention, and then we'll allow you guys to ask any questions that you may have, and we'll share some of our outcomes as well. So we just a little bit about Reach, just so everyone understands. And again, I hope this adds context to this conversation. We're operated by Civic Works, as everyone knows, and I won't read all the data on this school. I will just point out those things that I think are pertinent to this conversation. We are a school that has about 33% special ed population. So we are more than double the district average as it relates to our students with disabilities. I will say that our poverty index is, I think we just received new notification that we have 100% of our students are eligible or qualified for the free and reduced meals, and we are considered a Title I high school. One of the things I want to point out on the screen, though, in reviewing our data for our income and rising student files, we historically find that our students are traditionally performing 2 or more grade levels below in ELA and math, and a significant percentage of them each year are flagged for chronic absences, which means we had to put strategies in place to really address what we're seeing there in the data. What you'll see here in this slide here is just a breakdown of our programming. Again, I want to share this for context, but one of the things I really want to highlight as we talk about our programming that we offer here at Reach is if you look at where we talk about our championship athletic programming, in this climate where right now school leaders are being forced to try to leverage their resources to support student engagement, one of the things that we found is that what we looked at as a strength in our organization was our athletic programming. We have traditionally, our school is known for our athletic programs, and so what we wanted to do was to use that as leverage to introduce this school-wide intervention that we're going to share with you in a few moments in the upcoming slides. But I highlight these things because our student athletes happen to be the leaders in our school building. They serve on as class presidents, class officers, etc. And most importantly, our athletic programming has also continued throughout this pandemic. So while we were not in school, our coaches were still engaged with our student athletes. But what we noticed in looking at some of our performance indicators, this slide here just shows some of the things that we as a school have put in place to try to engage our students and our families. And again, I will not read all these things to you, but it just shows our concentrated effort to engage both our students and our families. And I'm going to tie this back into how we use the strength of our organization to really push forth this school-wide intervention. So these are just some of the efforts that we have put in place, the number of calls we had our teachers making daily. We have phone calls to engage parents and students in our instructional programming. But I'm going to kind of, so I don't get you guys too far off your schedule, I want to show you some data that we have been looking at as a school. And this is something that was quite alarming to us because we noticed that during this pandemic, it was extremely difficult to get students to engage, whether it be because they didn't have technology or any plethora of issues that they were having. But what we noticed is that in the start of the school year, our attendance rate was about 73%. And then we noticed a sharp decline for the months of October and November, which is when we started to brainstorm about how can we engage students. We realized the importance of engaging students with our strength to stay connected with our students. So we introduced this school-wide intervention designed to address what we're seeing here around our attendance rates, as well as around the number of students who will fail in core courses. So the team got together and we decided that we would tap into the strengths of our organization, which happens to be our athletic programming. So the way this program works is that our coaches were traditionally meeting with their student athletes throughout the week to talk with them about conditioning, to see how they're performing in class, to provide some mentorship opportunities, etc. So what we did is we built off of that particular platform. We established what we call Reaching for the Stars, our after-school program. What has been the most amazing piece to me about this particular program is that as I talk with my colleagues around the district, most high school principals were having a difficult time just to get students to buy into the virtual learning process. But what we've been able to do is now, as we built off that virtual athletic programming, is to put an after-school program in place. And what's amazing about it is the participation and the level of engagement that we're getting from high school students to participate in this program. Now, what's unique about it, we have our athletic coaches who actually go into the classes with our students. We operate the program 4 days a week. The coaches actually attend these sessions with the students. It builds off of those research-based interventions that the district is pushing to achieve 3,000 for ELA and Imagine Learning for math. But then we also offer our students enrichment opportunities on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And the results have been just phenomenal to watch because what we're seeing is that our program incorporates things like peer tutoring. And I can give you a perfect example where we had some students with disabilities who were some of them are some of our lower performing students in the class, with students who are right now targeted to be our class valedictorian, working in these after school programs and to see their interaction with the students and the students supporting each other and with those coaches in the classroom has just been simply amazing. Our goals of the program was simple. It was just to reduce the number of core course failures I just shared with you all, increase our student engagement, and most importantly, to provide that support to our students who were actually struggling. Some of the strategies that we use here, as I've already talked with you all about, is we use our coaches and athletic program to leverage those students and kind of provide incentives for those students to participate in our after-school program. We tapped into our student wholeness specialist, Ms. Brock, who's also on this call. She serves as that gatekeeper for those students to come into the program. And what she does is it gives her the opportunity, one, to forge those relationships that are essential to the success of a wholeness specialist. And then two, we also brought in our community engagement coordinator because we also are looking now to tap into parents so they can come into our after school program and meet with our community engagement specialists about the array of resources that we have available for our parents in our community. But our community engagement specialists also allowed us to tap into some of our partnerships so we can benefit from them and incorporate them into this program as well. So you'll see like on Tuesdays and Wednesdays where we're doing a lot of those enrichment activities, those resources are provided to us through our partnerships, which are established through our community engagement specialists. So this is what's been just so amazing and unique about this for me and for our team is that we are seeing a spike in the number of kids that are enrolling. What we ask our teachers to do is to make sure that these after-school programming it shouldn't mirror the regular day of instruction. The learning should be made fun. And so what we are seeing is that we're seeing students who are actively engaged in this process. And it's just been an amazing thing to watch. And of course, in our conversation, Commissioner McFadden, I wanted to share this with you. We've just been amazed at the results. We've also noted that we just pull our preliminary reports for our progress reports that we're just for this quarter that just ended. And what we're noticing for those students who participated in the program, we're noticing that they're no longer, those kids are showing improvements, I'll say it, in the grades. We're doing further analysis on that now to really look at who those kids were that attended. We're looking at their attendance, we're looking at their grades, and we're going to see if we see the spike or our desired outcomes as we do those analysis. So I just want to, again, just share this with you guys, and if you have any questions or thoughts, we're here, the team is here to entertain.
I appreciate it, Dr. Gresham, and a part of the reason I know that we're going into a presentation very closely related to this, but certainly as someone who is school-based, I understand the challenge, the day-to-day challenge, experience in engaging young people. That's the beginning, right? To engage them, to get them to buy in, to be present. And we also know that there are tons of barriers that our young people have, whether it is connectivity, as you all have been working to kind of mitigate that, but also just the home lives of some of our young people are not always as conducive to learning as we would like for them to be. So some of the strategies that you talked about, it's just great to hear that is happening in our schools, but particularly in yours. Commissioner Reed has joined us. Commissioner Reed, I don't know if you have any questions about what we just saw before we move on, but I want to extend an opportunity to you if you do. Commissioner Reed?
Sir, thank you for the great presentation, and thanks for your effort. I guess I'm not a member of the Teaching and Learning Committee, so I may be a little daft in terms of my question. But well, I guess most athletes in school, I guess you in your REACH group, is there motivation academically in terms of a minimum entry level in terms of grades before they can participate?
Yes.
And when they participate, do their grades go up because they're more energized and more connected to a community?
I think that's a great question. I'm going to answer part of it, and then I'm going to allow my athletic director to chime in on it. So to answer the first part of your question, yes, our student athletes must meet those eligibility requirements, which are established by the state and the district. And I am very proud to say that our student athletes are our higher performing students in our building. And I think that's largely in part to the gentleman you see on the screen here, our athletic director, Coach Tree. I'm going to allow him to respond to the second part of your question, because I think there's some things that we've been able to accomplish that he takes great pride in as it relates to our student athletes. Coach?
Thank you.
Yes, sir. How you doing, Mr. Reed, Mr. McFadden?
Hey, good afternoon, Coach.
Well,
Mr. Basketball. All right.
What's going on? You know, everything starts with Dr. Gresham understanding the value of athletics and how it can support the school mission. You know, by collaborating athletics, administration, school staff, the athletic director, myself, and coaches to support school instruction. So it starts with Dr. Gresham recognizing those tools that can, you know, help our young people, you know, and increase their learning. And, you know, athletics also inspire non-athletes to achieve in the school, because they see the athletes achieving and getting recognized a lot. They want to be a part of that recognition. So they begin to achieve as well. And, you know, I'm very proud to say over the last 3 years, the senior class valedictorian has been a boys basketball player. And I'm proud to say my son was one of them. I'm very, very proud to say that. And they all led us to basketball championships So they did well on the court and off the court. They all are currently in college on athletic or academic scholarships, and they still all achieving well at this time. So when you, as an athletic department, we make academic achievement as a primary focus. And along with Dr. Gresham's vision, it is easy for us to work with Dr. Gresham to make an after-school program work. So it comes with Dr. Gresham's vision and the collaboration of his staff in athletics that we make it work.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Thank you to the team, Dr. Gresham. It's great hearing about this progress into your team. And I'm looking forward at some point in visiting that building again, as you know, as we start to expand and move forward from this pandemic. So I appreciate your time this afternoon, you and your team, for dropping in. And I look forward to hearing more about the great work that's happening at your school to engage more of our young people and our families. So I appreciate you, Doc. Appreciate you, Coach. Appreciate you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thank you.
So I see that our presentation is queued up. I'm not sure who's leading this. I see two folks, Chief Jones and Chief Davis. Are you with us, or folks from your team here?
Yes, I'm here, Commissioner McFadden. I know Chief Jones is as well. I think I'm kicking it off.
Great. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Let's go ahead and go to the first slide if we could. I just want to frame this just a little bit before we go very deep into our Q2 grades. The grading that has occurred and the grades that have resulted in this incredibly different year is something that we have been paying attention to. We paid attention to it first quarter, and then the second quarter came out as well, and this is really what the presentation is going to be about. But first, I just want to be clear. I think, right, even though we're going to go into what we have seen in Baltimore City Public Schools, this is actually a nationwide problem. You're beginning to see more and more school systems kind of alter some of their grading policies in this space, and I think we will begin to consider that as well. We really wanted to see a second set of data to just see how our young people are doing in this space. And before we get into it, I think there's probably 2 or 3 things that are really important. One is that a lot of this is dependent on attendance, and you heard that from Dr. Gresham and his team. But as we have looked over the data, right, you can see a correlation between students that aren't online as much as they could be, and then of course their corresponding grades. We have 5 different work streams around attendance that we will get into, and I want to say that because attendance is always very hard. You could hear it from Principal Gresham as he talked about it on the school level, and rallying behind it on a system level is also very difficult. But at the same time, we've identified 5 different strands that I think are the best strands and the best work that we are doing in this space. As I mentioned, I think the second thing is we're going to have to consider some type of modification to our grading policy. We don't have anything planned just yet, but I do want people to know that that is something that we're going to consider as we move forward. And then the third one is we're going to have to figure out what the summer looks like, right? There's going to have to be, I think we're going to frankly be in recovery efforts for a while based on this school year and then even the past 19-20 school year where we missed the 4th quarter. We're going to be in recovery efforts for probably a few years, but it's going to start in the summer, and it's going to have to start by giving our students that haven't succeeded additional opportunities to succeed. And I frame all that because we're going to look at the data, and we know that we've got some changes that we've got to make, and we know there's some work that we've already done in the attendance space. We'll get into that as we proceed in our presentation. Chief Jones?
Thank you, Chief Davis. I really appreciate that introduction to this work. Joe, if we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to start with a little bit of a review of the key data points related to grades that have really been insightful for us about how students are truly experiencing the virtual learning. So first, let me share with you how our Q2 grades compare versus last year at Q2. So if you think about it, that's sort of our last period of time where we had students that were actually in person in schools. And so when we take a look across the board, we are seeing that we have student performance much lower at the end of this second quarter this year, when, as we know, for the most part, students have been primarily engaged in virtual instruction. And so what you'll see highlighted in this first box is for grades 2 to 5. If you look from left to right, you'll see the percentage of students with 1 or more E grades, which stands for excellent. So that's the highest level of grading performance for that grade band. And you'll see that that has decreased by 15.4 percentage points. And so if you go from left to right, you'll see that those numbers, particularly for our higher grade performance levels, has continued to go down. And then you start to see is that you have more students in that big bucket on the far right, which is the percentage of students with 1 or more failing grades. And so what you'll see as a common theme here that we saw in Q1 is that we do have more and more students that are not performing well, and failing grades are a serious concern. You'll also see on the bottom table for our higher grades, for grades 6 to 12, a similar trend. So we now have 17.9% of our students in those grades that have failing grades. So key takeaway here, student performance as indicated by grades has gone down significantly this Q2 versus last year's Q2. Next slide. When we take a look at this period of time, so now we're taking a look at the trend from last Q2 to first quarter this year, which again was a virtual instruction period, and where we are Q2, we're now looking at failures, and we're seeing an increase in the failure rate. And that is really important, partly because it just indicates that it's not really getting better going from Q1 to Q2. And so what that says, as Chief Davis pointed out, is that we do have to think about making some changes in order to allow these students to actually make up ground for the content that they haven't perhaps mastered, to the extent that it allows it to be reflected in their performance. And that is largely predicated on attendance. And we're going to get into the relationship between attendance and grades momentarily. So a key here, you're taking a look at it across grade bands, and you'll even notice here for even our youngest learners, for those students in pre-kindergarten and first grade, we're showing there at a rate of like 39.6% of them aren't doing well as it relates to their grade performance. Next slide. So when we think about students that have been challenged during this pandemic, we've been keeping a really close eye around what this means for special populations of students, knowing that we have a lot of students that were already vulnerable pre-pandemic, and the pandemic has just really heightened some of the ability for us to be able to not only engage those students, but for them to actually be able to thrive in this environment. And while some of the work that we've done around access to technology is a good first start, it does not necessarily guarantee that the learning is happening or that their performance is reflective of being able to really be successful. So what you'll note here on this slide and the next slide is when we take a look at it by grade bands, certain populations are showing a disproportionate impact as reflected in their grades. So when we look at our English learners, we're seeing that there is an increase of 36.3 percentage points when we compare their results for that particular population last year at Q2. And then similarly, you'll see 34.9 percentage point change for our Hispanic and Latinx students. And then interestingly, when we look at our students with disabilities and homeless students, we also see an increase in failing grades there, but it's more in line with what we've been seeing just in the general student population. And so when we take a look at that, it shows us that for students with disabilities, we're showing that we have an increase from 37% to 59%. And for our homeless students, that number goes up to 64%. So again, just more evidence that we have to be attentive to the needs of our students in these special population groups because they are experiencing this pandemic differently. Next slide. And then similarly, this gives us the similar data points as it relates to grades 6 to 12. So I won't read those data points, but again, they are highlighted for you here, again, re-emphasizing the point around needing to really be attentive to the needs of our homeless English learner and Hispanic or Latinx student groups. Next slide, please. So what does this mean for high school? So while we just took a look at the grades distribution, we also want to take a look at grade point averages, which we know are critical indicators around how students are performing at the high school level. And what we're seeing here is that when we take a look at grade performance, there are more students that have grade GPA, quarterly GPAs of less than 2.0 this year versus last year. So what I want to highlight for you first and foremost is that first row of bars is the combination of grades 9 to 12. And underneath that, they are broken down by individual high school grade. So if you take a look at that first row of bars with me, you'll see that those orange bars, there's a big jump from last year to this year. And those are students that have a GPA that is less than 1.0. However, when you take a look at the difference between the bars over to those students that had a GPA of 3 or more, you'll see there's not quite as much of a difference there. So while there is a dip, it's not as much of a dip. That suggests to us that some of our higher performing students are weathering this pandemic a little bit better. So again, it may not be perfect. This is not a cohort analysis. So this isn't telling us for this one particular group of students, what does it mean this year? But because this is the view that takes a look across all 4 grades, it does give us a sense around the sort of the staying power, if you will, of students being able to sort of weather that storm without this actually being a cohort analysis. Furthermore, if you start to look at individual rows that depict results by grade, you'll also see that there's a really long bar for our 9th graders. And that orange bar at the bottom is a real area of concern. And so one of the things we are going to talk about is what are we doing with 9th grade? And it's one of the key reasons that we've prioritized the return of in-person learning opportunities for 9th grade students because of that critical year. So our ability to be able to get these students back on track will have significant impacts on their ability to graduate on time and to be able to pursue post-secondary opportunities and be successful. Next slide. So as we think about what this all means, the views that we've just given you give us an understanding around what does this mean at the district level? What does it mean at large? What I want to remind people of is that we've always taken a look at how grades serve as an indicator of student performance relative to other indicators that help us understand and identify students that might need additional supports. So as a district, we, like many other school systems, we use what we refer to as early warning indicators as one of the ways of identifying students and identifying actions that we can take to be able to get those students that might have signs of not being on track, to get them on track before it becomes even more challenging to try to turn that around. And so what I want to do first is just give a little bit of an overview around what this early warning indicator system includes. And then I want to share some data with you around how that shows up in light of our Q2 analysis. So first, I want to call out that there are really 3 primary indicators that we look at: attendance, behavior, and core course failure or course performance. We refer to them as the ABCs. And so one of the things that you'll see noted on the right side is exactly what does that look like as we unpack our data, because we have dashboards that schools use to actually look at the performance level at the student level to identify which of these students have no indicators, which have 1 or more, and that actually informs some of the actions that those students receive in terms of how schools support them. And so as it relates to the attendance indicator, you'll see a reference there in terms of tiers. We've highlighted tiers 2 and 3 because those fall under that definition of what it means to be chronically absent, which we often talk about as one of the most key indicators of attendance. There's that B, which is behavior, which we typically look at suspensions. In light of all of the virtual activity, behavior has not risen to the top as a key focus area because we're not suspending students right now. So it's really about the A and the C. And the C, as we've translated it, takes a look at one or two things. one and or two things. We're either looking at the failure of one or more core courses, or we're looking at the unweighted core course GPA. So that's one of the reasons that we did share that GPA data earlier, because the way that that plays out for early warning indicators gives considerations to both core course performance as well as the GPA itself. And again, what are the keys for us here? We analyze the data, we identify the students, and we take action. Next slide, please. So what does that mean for grades 3 to 8? So if you bear with me, I want to sort of unpack this slide for you. So first, I'm actually going to ask you to take a look at the chart versus looking at the narrative. So at the top of this chart, we see what says no indicators. So that is the first category that we want to think about, right? So this would be an indication that these are students that have not sort of risen to the top to say, we need to take immediate action because they're on track. Well, what we see here is that that number has gone down. So we've gone down from over 50%, 52.4, now to being less than 50% and actually less than 40 at 39.4% of our students that don't have one of these three indicators. Now, when we take a look at those other indicators, again, the A and the C being most relevant right now, we see that there is a significant increase in the number of students that have both of those indicators. That is one of the key reasons that we have been emphasizing attendance and engagement, because those are critical factors to being able to get student learning happening again. And then on top of that, we also take a look at, well, what does it mean for attendance only versus what does it mean for core course performance only? And you can see there where the differences are. So we see a decrease on the chronic absence, one indicator, and then we see a little bit of an uptick in terms of the failing course performance indicator. Again, while those might be moving slightly, we see a larger uptick when we put those two factors together, which is the second row that you see there. Next slide. And then when we take a look at what this means for our 9th to 12th graders, again, we see that there are fewer students that actually have 0 indicators, and we see a large increase in the number of students that actually have 2 indicators, both the chronic absence and the failing core course. Next slide. So as we transition over to the discussion around what this all means in terms of how we are addressing it as a district, I do just want to point out that this is something that we have been looking at certainly more closely since Q1, because we knew with the data we had from Q1 that we were going to have to really be thoughtful around whether or not we can make ground between Q1 and Q2 in significant ways in order to sort of help stem some of the tide that we were seeing. And so when we talk about what actions we're taking, Chief Davis is going to talk to us a bit about what that means in terms of the work of the attendance body of work and how this is starting to play out across district and with some of our schools. Back to you, Chief Davis.
Thanks, Chief Jones. As we're at the slide that talks about barriers for student engagement, you'll see in just a minute that this is going to align with the different areas that we have prioritized around technology, academics, lack of interest, competing demands. We tried to hit these in different ways. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And we've had 5 different teams that have been working on specific district supports. The first one is around technology. We've done a really good job of getting technology out. You saw the data from Principal Gresham, and that's just one school with reach. We've done that across the board, but there are still some students and some families that are struggling with this. And so getting down to the last, few hundred or few thousand that still need support is really what this team has been working on, and really trying to reduce that number of folks that are still struggling with technology. The second piece of work is really around family and community engagement, right? We literally have had an attendance bus tour where the attendance bus has gone to 5 or 6 different areas already just to promote positive attendance. And frankly, sometimes we've even had some technology on the bus or been able to help parents in different ways. That attendance bus is just in some ways a very strong PR mechanism so that we're literally out in the community with our community engagement team and interacting with families so that they know that attendance matters in a really, really strong way. They've also put together a family university where they've got different sessions to make sure that not only that families know that attendance is important, but what you can do as a parent as well. You can see school-based systems and support, right? So when you think about it, right, you think about technology, you think about family and community engagement, and then there's also just the internal systems that schools have, right? They have to have a strong attendance team. And so what we've done is we've had schools come together to share best practices with their attendance monitors, with the person that is in charge of attendance. And we've had a really big uptick from schools to come to this, to learn from each other, and really to come together as kind of, you might want to call a mini community of folks that are kind of leading the attendance charge within their specific schools. Another kind of part to this that I would bring up is during these attendance stats that we have, we've also brought principals on board to kind of tell us what has worked with them. So we've had, for instance, Principal Samuel from Tench Tillman. We've had Principal D'Ambrosia from ACE. We've had Principal Lampkin from NAF. Because the main thing when you're talking about school-based systems and supports, we don't want schools having to figure it out on their own. When some of our schools are doing a really strong job, like say Tench or NAF, we want folks to learn from them. And bringing the principals on board to really push that, along with the attendance teams that are happening, really tries to, in the end, infiltrate the best practices to as many of our schools as possible. You can see district level student engagement and support. This is kind of the tedious work, right? I mean, what we aren't saying about this attendance stat is that we look at a whole lot of data. We try to disaggregate it in different ways. And one of the ways that we looked at it is what students are literally on the least amount of time, right? What students have been on virtually the least amount. And our attendance team, along with our re-engagement team, have been working very hard to reach out to those families first, right? Those are the families and those are the students that are struggling the most, and they're reaching out to them. Sometimes they're calling them in for meetings to kind of talk through what the barriers are and how we can support them. At other times, we're linking them up with their school and making sure that they've got everything that they need and get re-entry back into place. But it is very tedious and it is individualized, right? And I think that when you start looking into attendance, this is what you end up finding out. Sure, we can talk about systems in schools and we can share best practices, but then there's also the family by family work that is happening. And so the attendance team, the re-engagement team is really doing that. And if they run into stone walls and they can't get a hold of a family, then they end up doing home visits and working with some of our partners to do that the right way. And then you can also see support for our working students, right? This is a very difficult one. There are students and families that, that really need their young person to work, but at the same time, this hurts them with respect to their grades and with respect to their engagement online. And so we're really trying to get deep into analyzing the problem, trying to figure out if we can have work-based learning credits and then having as many partnerships as possible. Another kind of piece of work to this is that we have stood up a virtual evening school. We've just started it in the last month or two. It is very piloty. But again, there are some students that have to work, and if they've had to make that decision, especially in the middle of a pandemic, we want to offer evening classes if that's what works best for them. It's a little bit like the previous part where it's student by student, like family by family. What do they need? And so our district team has really had to do that outreach and try to figure that out. Let's keep going. Here's some additional information around technology to support attendance, right? You can see the laptops and the hotspots that were assigned, the Comcast connectivity as well. I know Commissioner Reed, if he's still on, was, very vocal in a lot of ways, and that's more than appreciated at one of our last school board meetings. Let's keep going. The attendance bus tour I talked about, those are the 5 areas we've been at, right? 67 people served on 3 different bus visits, and we're trying to push this out and have even more communication around it so that neighborhoods know when the bus tour is really coming. Let's keep going. The best practices across schools, right? I talked a little bit about this with respect to attendance teams. But again, I can't emphasize enough that when you have 170 schools, that there are some that are doing better. I mentioned Tench-Tillman. If you take a look at their attendance data, they're always very high. And one of the things that I feel like we heard first and foremost was, right, schools that are making progress really get on this every single day, right? If you take a look at that, at the last point there on the slide, fostering and sustaining family connections, daily phone calls, right? Right when you find out that a child is not online, all right, our schools that are getting to the families right away sends that message that this is important and you have to be there day by day. So there's a number of different things we've seen across our schools. That's one that I think has garnered a little bit more attention than others. District outreach to families. This is what I was talking about, the tedious work that the re-engagement team and the attendance team have been doing, right? Staff have made 761 calls, 249 successful family or contacts, and those are with families and students that had a very low amount of logins, and you can see that there. We've also made wellness visits, and then for those that have requested technology, we have gotten technology out to them. We do have an attendance hotline. We don't have a lot of calls that come into it, which probably means we need to communicate it more, but you can see it there. Right, here's some of the additional efforts that you can see around the English Learners Work Group and then also the 9th grade initiative, right? I mean, I think that when we have looked at the data for the last couple of months, I will say that the 9th grade data stands out a lot. We're fortunate that we do have 9th grade teams that work collaboratively at our high schools. You can see the different components. I think if people have been, have seen some of our high school or 9th grade work, this won't come as a surprise, especially around individualized student plans, quarterly student conferences, right? You can really see that these are the things that, it says that there's no funding involved with this because it's about a collective group of individuals on the school level that work in collaboration for our 9th graders. I think that is, again, part of the good attendance work, and it has to be a priority because when you look at the data, it is the 9th grade that have a drop off on their attendance, and then consequently, right, they're the highest at risk for failing. And we all know that if you fail in the 9th grade, your chances of dropping out are increased. So that's why there's even more work that has to happen and has happened. You can see the English Learner Work Group as well, right? Some of it is around professional development. Some of it is around communication and really making sure that the collaborations on the school level are really strong. We know that this is an area that we can do more on. But we do want people to know that we are attacking both of these areas because when we look at the data, these populations need support. And again, between Chief Jones and I, if there's additional questions, we're happy to answer them.
Thanks for the presentation. I do want to the data, what we were just presented is some really tough information to look at based on where our students are and the work that is happening around it. The ABCs, right? We think about attendance. We think about, I want to make sure that I'm saying them correctly. We think about attendance, we think about behavior, and then we think about core course failure. Okay, so the majority of this presentation really focused on perhaps, I guess, attendance, and not a lot around academics and academic achievement. So certainly what I do know is that there are barriers that present challenges for students to engage and stay connected. What I also know is based on a vibrant school program that engages young people, students can be motivated to be more engaged, even when they are presented with some challenges. So I appreciate the work that you all are talking about with, wholeness and with community school coordinators and it being a family by family approach, given where we are. But at the same time, I do not see in this presentation and the update, a lot of work that is happening around academic support, achievement, interventions, problem solving, and targeting. I know that being virtual is causing a barrier. I understand that. But as we think about moving forward, based on the reality of where we are, a lot of our young people are still, and families are still opting to stay home, right? So a lot of our families are not opting in to that in-person option that is being provided for them. So what that says to me directly is that we do have to figure out a way to connect, to reach them, and to increase student achievement virtually, in addition to that in-person support that we know is beneficial to a lot of our families and students. I would just like to hear a little bit more about what our academic strategies are, what professional learning and development looks like for teachers, especially as we're thinking about having teachers teach, and I'm going right into it next week, having to teach virtually and in person simultaneously, right? Are we developing our staff to be able to do that and still identify gaps, trends, and data where we can kind of support their achievement even in this setting? So to be specific, what are schools doing that are exceeding the district average? So do we have schools that are currently exceeding some of this data that we saw in the GPA analysis, in student failures from from last year to this year for quarter 2, and looking at these early warning indicators, which is really disheartening, but it is our reality. So it's not it's our reality. But are there schools that are exceeding the district average right now? And what are some of the strategies that they're doing to support that achievement or that exceeding of the district averages?
I would probably point out two things, Commissioner McFadden. One is I call it a daily urgency, where if a child isn't there, they're followed up on immediately. And in the end, that is rallying people, right, every single day to follow up. And it's not something that, you can do that for a day, if you will, but kind of to your point about a vibrant, I kind of heard you say a vibrant school culture that brings kids in. An urgent school culture where as a family, you're going to get a call and you're going to get a follow-up if my child is not online or frankly not in school when we are in brick and mortar, is a type of culture as well. And schools that have created that or are working to create that, we see improvements. I think another thing that we see is when there is an attendance, I don't want to say accountability, but what I want to say is kind of an attendance culture throughout the building. So it's not just the principal saying it, or it's not just the attendance monitor, but it is a real team. Then you end up having a type of culture that also usually exceeds the average. So I think, I would say those two things. I never get away from the culture aspect that you talked about, Commissioner McFadden, because I think a strong school culture automatically brings kids in, and is usually not, say, attendance laden or not attendance specific, but usually it having stronger attendance results from it. So I would say 2 or 3 things that we've seen are really those.
And I would just add to that, Chief Davis, I think from an academic perspective, we've also seen that where folks are actually using the additional personalized learning resources and that they are more consistently having students participate at the levels that are recommended and taking advantage of those Lab Wednesdays and some of those other intervention opportunities, it's really helping. Because I think one of the things we recognized early on is that it would be certainly challenging to make sure that we can sort of meet every child where they are in this circumstance. So the suite of resources that have been made available, when they're utilized, we do tend to see better results. Now, I can't say right off the bat, like whether or not we've done like a full-fledged analysis around all the other types of strategies that are in play, but that is certainly one contributing factor. Another that we've also seen is in terms of how folks are actually using the data to inform their small groups. So recall we were intentional about how we were going to leverage diagnostics this year and just how our assessment strategy would serve as a basis for progress monitoring academic performance. Those schools that have doubled down on that are actually being able to see some real benefit of that. So again, it's not really like, kind of, I guess, like a big aha, but I just want to acknowledge that for folks that are doing those things, they tend to see better results. But to Chief Davis's point, they're all predicated on a student being engaged, that a student is actually showing up, that they are, in some cases, of that frame of mind to be able to operate independently, because some of this does require a different set of work habits that many of our students have been accustomed to implementing on a day-to-day basis. And so I think some of that contributes to this. And I think that's also why you see us talking a lot about the wholeness piece, because even for those that early on were able to sort of sustain a pace of virtual learning, it's starting to wear. It's starting to wear on some students now, because we've been at this much longer than people would have anticipated. So we do have to keep an eye on it. I think we are learning what are some of the practices that allow virtual learning to be more effective, and that does get reflected in the professional development that is being implemented. But it still means that there are other challenges that creep in as this progresses. So this idea of an extended recovery period, I think, is really an important point for us to be thinking about. And to Chief Davis's point, the plan around like, what does summer look like? What does next fall look like? Like in many ways, we're starting to think about really like year-long learning, year-round learning. Like how do we find ways to engage, be it in person, be it virtual, so that every student can be engaged in a way that will allow them to continue their academic progress.
I appreciate that, Chief Jones. I thank you for that. And it is my core belief that there has to be a team already on recovery and acceleration, right? Because we are dealing with the immediate reality of dealing with the pandemic. So we have to certainly think long-term in addition to mitigating things that we have to take care of right now. And I'm saying that to go back to a point that you were just making around things that some schools we find are doing well, right? And we're focusing on that wholeness piece. My concern is, as we engage students and bring them back into our spaces, whether they are virtual or in person, brick and mortar, what infrastructure is in place to support those young people to meet their needs currently and to accelerate them? Because clearly we see that that is something that we need. So in my brain, from what I heard you all say, some of these schools, to Chief Davis's point, have this daily urgency, right, about engaging young people. Where is the district's daily urgency? And I know that there are folks working, just like I know that there are pockets of schools that are doing things in a better way than others. But from the district's perspective, where is our urgency to ensure, yes, the wholeness is important. And yes, also, we need to meet some of the needs of our families. That's a reality, right? A reality is making sure that some of the needs of our families are met, because that is some of the reason why our young people are not engaging. But once we've done that, how are we going to support them? I mean, I was sworn, and I know that other commissioners, we're sworn to take care of the wholeness of our young people, but to also ensure that they can conjugate verbs, multiply, add, subtract, think critically, and be ready to compete. So that is just a real concern of mine right now. Yes, I know that we're taking care of where we are, I understand that, but we also have to start thinking about longer term. And so it brings something else, and then I'll lead to Commissioner Reed. Have we done a priority skills assessment for grade level achievement? So what do I mean by that? If we take grade bands and curricular bands per grade, are we looking at, and I know some of this work has happened, so I just wanted to be elevated in this discussion. Have we highlighted some priority skills that third graders need to be able to master or have before they transition to fourth grade, so forth and so on, so that we kind of restructure, as you all were saying, what curriculum looks like right now as we're in a pandemic and we're recovering, so that we can really start to have that conversation about remediation and acceleration.
So at the beginning of the year, that type of priority standardization or priority standards, if you will, we did that at the beginning of the year, knowing that we probably weren't going to be able to get to everything and what are the main things that each grade level needs to hit in ELA and math. I think now that we're just about ready to see some middle of the year results, I think we're going to have to look at that and figure out if we have to make any changes with respect to our student achievement. We just haven't been able to go deep into that just yet because our students have frankly been taking middle of the year assessments. And we're gonna do somewhat very similar to what you said. We already know what the priority standards are, but we just have to know district-wide where we've succeeded more than other places and kind of double down in specific standards.
I didn't know if someone else wanted to chime in before. I think I saw Dr. Dabrowski come in.
I did, yes. Thanks, Commissioner McFadden. I've been, I'm coming into my 4th week in the district, and I have been really listening to the challenges and reading and learning and really trying to think about, I think as Chief Davis at the beginning, the national crisis we're facing right now and what we have been what our students have experienced in almost a year of this virtual space. And I think your piece around urgency is resonating with me as I think about the work we need to gear up for summer. And to your point, the pieces and the ways we work with our existing curriculum to identify those critical places for a rising 2nd grader, a rising 4th grader, to know what do we need to offer them and our families in the summer, so that if we are not confident that our children have what they need, that we are positioning ourselves to be ready for summer supports. And this gets into the recovery as a first wave of support, knowing that this is a multi-year effort. So I'm conscious of how new I am into the district and trying not to overstep, because I agree with you. I think this is happening in our different teams. And as I'm going into meetings and learning about this, but I want to just say here in this space that this is my priority coming in, is how we are going to look at this data, recognize the seriousness and the urgency required to get at the academic acceleration, remediation, all of those pieces that you've named. So I just wanted to say that. And I'm mindful of my newness to the space and want to be respectful of work that's already going on in that, and not to infer that it's not being done. But I just apologize for my newness in terms of being able to speak at that level of detail that I know this topic needs, and I want to reassure that it is a priority of my work right now.
I appreciate that, Dr. Dabrowski, and what we saw toward perhaps the beginning when we saw Dr. Gresham and his team come on, it seems like they are an example, just like we have some other examples that we mentioned. We have examples. They are an example of how they're literally using the data that they see. And they're also using a lot of the student interest, right, to engage them. But they also, it's a collaborative effort. I understand that. But we have some schools that are making some progress. And to be quite honest, listening to Dr. Gresham also talk about how the majority of his students are receiving free and reduced meals, right? So that can be an indication of some of the needs that and the challenges that are experienced in that school. But even still, they're using that data to kind of create a plan. I would just like to hear some systemic consistency around how that is happening across the board and not in pockets, because all of our young people deserve that and they're going to need it. Commissioner Reed, I know that you're with us. Do you have?
I guess first, it's good to see the CAO, her face. I've heard about her, but 4 weeks later now I get to see her. Welcome aboard. God bless you. I guess one word that resonated, and I thank you, Chiefs, for this, is be engaged. And I guess you talked about the correlation between strong students continue to be strong students, I'm sure because they were engaged, and the weaker students starting to fall to the side. But I'm putting myself in the shoes of a ninth grader. I'm a ninth grader. I failed 3 courses. I want to pass. I don't want to be embarrassed by being in ninth grade again next year. I have not had a year and a half of education because of COVID. What do you do in terms of, you talked about this, but I don't know if you guys pushed the needle on this, but, sorry. You talked about the idea of a modification to the grading policy. I don't know if that's something you talk about later on, but the other thing you talked about was, what will the summer look like? I think, I'm not on the teaching and learning committee, but I guess one thing I'm pushing for is a vigorous summer program, because as a commissioner, probably the most important dynamic for me going forward is that we hit the ground running in August, September. It's not going to be perfect. But we hit the ground running August and September where we have a program in place where we fulfill the needs of 78,000 kids. So I think summer is probably the bridge. But what do we do this summer to make it work next fall? I don't know if it's in a future presentation or something ancillary, but I really think I think summer's big. And I think the beginning of the fall is going to be the big test for all school systems.
Commissioner Reed, I'll jump in, and I don't want to speak for Dr. Dabrowski, but I do want to acknowledge that there are plans for our board update around summer learning, and the plans for summer, I believe it's slated for early May, just so you know. So that information will be shared publicly, and you'll have much more insight around what that looks like. But I do just want to remind us, the school year's not over yet. So while we have talked a lot about summer and about the fall, I do just want to acknowledge the point that John raised earlier around, schools are getting back middle of the year diagnostic data now. Like, they're getting curricular progress monitoring assessment data now. So there's still a push at the school level for folks to be using that data to be able to make those adjustments so that we can double down and be, operating with the urgency that we are all feeling to be able to keep students on track. I'm just acknowledging that some of that is a work in progress. So we don't necessarily have those stories to share with you at this point. But again, we also have a board presentation coming up where we're going to be sharing an update around the middle of year results. And what does that tell us around how things are being experienced and some of the actions that are being taken? So I just want to just acknowledge, like, our intent today was to be able to, number one, share the update. Like, we want people to understand that we are looking at grades. We recognize academic challenges are showing up as grades being one of the indicators, not the only one, not necessarily any of them. None of them are perfect, but it does tell us something. And we want to be able to really reflect on that and think about what that means for our work. And we also want to be able to acknowledge that there has been some significant progress made, particularly as it relates to the attendance body of work, which is a precursor to being able to get students fully engaged and get them learning. Right. So that is really what this is intended to do. It is a part of sort of that trajectory of updates so that you'll be able to see how these other pieces fit in. But hopefully it does give you a sense that, like, this is not something that we feel a lack of urgency around. It is something that we care deeply about and we recognize requires bold actions in some cases. And it requires us to be mindful of both district level actions as well as school level actions, because that's where it happens. It happens at the school level, and it happens with teachers and students, and it happens with schools and families. So we just wanted to be able to share that and, of course, obtain your questions, make sure that we are communicating with the public around where we are, but know that this is part of an ongoing dialogue. It's not a one and done, and it certainly is not intended to reflect any lack of urgency on our part and intentionality around making the most of every moment we have with our students.
And Dr. Jones, thank you. I appreciate probably more than most the data. So thank you very much for the data. But I guess looking at the data, can you ascertain that the trend is our friend going forward? Trend in terms of attendance, trends in terms of grades, trends in terms of connectivity.
Yeah. What I can tell you is that, again, it's one of those things like a district of more than 170 schools, there's variability. So are there trends? Yes. Some are going up, some are flat, and some are sort of like dipping and wavering along the way. So part of what we're trying to do is to make sure that we lift up where we see those successes. So to Chief Davis's earlier point, being able to bring those school leaders to the forefront so that they can help spread those best practices and prompt thinking and innovation and ideas is part of how we're trying to do the work more consistently. And it's to just indicate, like, we've always done it more in pockets. We're now trying to organize it in a way that will hopefully accelerate the pace at which we'll be able to make those improvements and share those practices. But it's challenging. We're a really large district with a lot of schools. So I just think we have to be honest with ourselves that, like, we're probably not going to see like a big uptick district-wide in the near term, but we're definitely going to see some differences along the way. And that tells us something, and we need to be able to reflect on that.
Thank you.
I do think there is one data point that's very nuanced, but I feel like, especially for folks that have been in schools, right, they know this. Like, your attendance is the highest at the beginning of the year, right? As the year goes on, the attendance, if you take week by week, it actually goes down, right? And so as we've been tracking our attendance week by week, we've actually flattened it out. And so not seeing a sharp decline may not be, say, a headliner, but as the year goes on, not seeing a decline and flattening it out where it is right now is a positive. When we first started this attendance stat, we were below 80%. And one of the goals was we got to get a weekly average above 80. And we did that one week, and then we dipped back down a little bit below it. So, right, we haven't seen the decline in the last, I would say, 2 months that you would normally see at this time of the year. And I frankly think that's because we've made this a priority. It's tedious and it's difficult. And it's, you know, if I'm real honest about this, like, making this a priority while we're also bringing back hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of teachers into a new space, like, those simultaneous lifts is a little bit much for a lot of us. But it is a combination of focusing on students and how we can support them, and then focusing on our staff as they are going into school and how we support them as well. So it's about the people, but from a data perspective, right, it's a nuanced trend in that we're really not seeing the decline that I feel like I normally see during this time of year.
And if I may just add a couple of things, and I appreciate Chief Davis really talking about the pull on operations and health and safety right now as staff and students return. As I think about academic recovery, I do want to respond to say, we know that we've got some best practices coming from the field regarding what works in terms of tutoring models and what that looks like to accelerate student learning in the areas of literacy and math. Those are things we're looking very closely at as we get our new funding coming from ESSER that really will help us prioritize summer programming in strategic ways. We're looking close at having a very clear criteria for what tutoring could look like. And I think the other piece that I just want to name is we mentioned the grading policies that exist. We do need to look at them. We have a work group that's looking very closely and is putting forward draft recommendations that we will bring forward to say, how do we keep our young people engaged? Because when we say to a student, you've got an F or you've failed, we know that's not necessarily an engagement strategy. For some, that's just enough to say, I'm done. And so we need to be able to say, what will be the opportunities for students to be able to show their learning and be given extra attempts to try things, not in a way that is lowering our expectations, but actually being responsive to what they're experiencing right now in this very, very, very challenging time. So I say that to say we are working in those things, and I'm looking forward to being able to come to the board with those in the coming weeks as we prepare those. And I know we have an April date that we'll be back to you, as well as in May for the summer pieces. But I just, again, I want to say that these are the things we are working, and I just do want to say that getting kids back to in-person learning is going to open up new challenges, but actually we know that's going to help us ultimately in terms of this recovery we need to do for students. So I say all of that again, recognizing I'm new to this space, but I do know that these are the work pieces that we have to move.
Thank you, Chiefs, and thank you, Commissioner. Thank you very much, Ron.
Thank you for your questions, Commissioner Reed. I just encourage us as we think about the middle of the year, the MOY information that's going to come to us, and our plan for summer learning, that we really drill down on strategies that are going to work systemically as best as we can. And I know that there's a lot to that. But we hear the data, and it's important for us to see it. I think it will be very beneficial for the board to know what is happening as a result of seeing that data. What are we doing as a system, and not necessarily in pockets, but what are we doing as a system to really make sure that we're moving our young people and our families forward? I know that it is a challenge, but I also know and am assured that we have some of the most brilliant people working in city schools to make sure that this is a priority, and that urgency remains there for the sake of our children. I know that. So I appreciate the discussion today. I appreciate everyone's contribution and their perspective, and I look forward to, and I know that we have young people that are in our spaces right now today. They've gone back this week. So they've gone back in the building. We haven't stopped being in school per se, but just physically. So thank you all for the presentation. I look forward to hearing more updates in the future. And you all take care and stay safe. I know you're not leaving until we dismiss the meeting, but thank you all for it. We have one item on our agenda for procurement today. And that is, I believe it is school specialty. Once it comes up on my screen, I believe that I'm right with that. Am I right about that? Yes, I am. So we don't necessarily need to go through it. There is a question that I have about, unless Commissioner Reed, do you have any questions about this item?
No, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome. When we look at the MBE, WBE results, says the solicitation did incorporate a good faith effort by vendors to achieve a minimum 25% participation. City Schools is working with the vendor to receive information on this good faith goal. Can we elaborate on that just a little bit? Just color that in just a little bit more?
Absolutely. Jessica Wilson, I'm here to talk a little bit more about that today. The solicitation before you is a piggyback contract with Howard County, which is kind of generally how we approach this particular vendor. And the part of their solicitation included a good faith effort there of that 25% participation. We've already reached out to school specialty and had initial conversations about how they track their information and what data may be available. They've responded with, they use, hundreds, if not thousands, of different vendors, depending on the individual items in their catalog. And they do have several vendors that are identified in their system as WMBE. And we're actually having follow-up meetings with them this week to determine what data is available in order for us to be able to have conversations about reporting back to the board about progress towards that 25% good faith goal.
Thank you. So do you think we'll be able to hear a little bit more about that before this comes to the full board?
I'll certainly report back on whatever we find out and what we can confirm in the meeting that we're having this week with the vendor at that board meeting. And we'll continue to have those conversations with the vendor after the board meeting as well.
I appreciate that. I do know that there are questions. Some commissioners did have some questions about it. So just to be prepared to respond and just continue to elaborate on this MBE and WBE, that 25% good faith effort. So thank you for that. Commissioner Reed, did you have anything else before we wrap up? I'm not sure if Commissioner, thank you, Ms. Wilson, Jessica, thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner Reed, I see you.
No, fine, thank you. Thank you for letting me participate.
Absolutely, it's great to have you. You know, I was lonely without another commissioner on this afternoon. I want to just make sure that Commissioner Sykes has not joined us. I just want to be sure because he is the student on this committee, and I want to make sure that he has an opportunity to chime in, and I do not see that he is present. We do not have anyone signed up for public comment. However, I do want to remind folks that are listening or that will be watching this as it is posted that advanced sign-up is permitted at 9 a.m. on the Thursday prior to a meeting. So you can begin signing up to speak either at a committee meeting or at our public board meetings the Thursday at 9 a.m. prior to the meeting. And you have until 5 o'clock on the Monday before the meeting on Tuesday to make sure that you are on the agenda to speak for public comment. And certainly in our committee meetings, we have 5 individuals that are able to speak, and they're granted 3 minutes to speak based on our practices. Our next meeting will be on April the 6th, 2021, at 3:30 p.m. We'll be hearing an English learner and ESOL update for school year 21. In addition to English language arts and math strategy supports and performance update. I'm assuming, Chief Jones, that is going to include that middle of the year data. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Great. And then we'll also hear an update on the teacher and principal pipeline for city schools. If there is nothing else this evening, I just wish everyone a very safe rest of your evening. The sun has made its appearance, so enjoy some vitamin D in the safest way that you possibly can. And just remember that we do what we do for our children. And if our children are prepared to lead the world, then our future is bright. And that means that we have a significant responsibility to ensure that they are prepared to lead innovation, creativity, critical thinking in the world and in the days to come. So I bid you all a farewell. Have a great evening. And we will see, we do have a board meeting on Tuesday, but I'm not the chair of the board. I'm just the chair of this meeting. But we do have a board meeting this upcoming Tuesday. So hopefully we will see you all on Tuesday evening. Have a great evening, everyone.